Hello Castlevania fans, this is Story Dive, back again. In this video I will be going over Season 3 of the Netflix animated series Castlevania, explaining it, breaking it down, pointing out all the references and Easter eggs I noticed, as well as interpreting the ending and what I believe it means for the next season, if there is a next season. Just to give my quick review of this season, I have to admit I didn't like it as much as Season 2, although it definitely went in some interesting directions and it really culminated into an epic finale. This season was pretty slow at first, that is until the last two episodes when the shit hits the fan and it gets super crazy. I'm talking like Hellsing Ultimate crazy, and there's a lot of action and even some hentai in there as well. Those were definitely my favorite episodes of the season. As you probably guessed, there will be spoilers in this video, so if you haven't seen the series, go watch it on Netflix right now, then come back to this video. As the season begins, we are reintroduced to Alucard, the son of Dracula, who is now living alone in Castlevania after killing his father, Dracula, in the final battle of the last season, and apparently he's gone batshit crazy, speaking to dolls that he believes to be Trevor Belmont and Sypha Belnades, although admittedly his impression is pretty good. However, he doesn't even remember how long he's been there. He's in a bad way. Meanwhile, Trevor and Sypha have been traveling around the countryside fighting creatures of the night that still remain after the battle of last season. And that's exactly what they do in this scene. Like the last season, some of the monsters are original monsters, original designs, and some of them are pretty clearly monsters from some of the Castlevania games. For instance, this is definitely a Minotaur, a werewolf from various games. And this guy kind of looks like a fishman from the first game or some of the early games. Eventually they wander into a town named Lindenfeld, where they spend most of the season, and this is where we are introduced to Saint Germain. Like Hector and Isaac, Saint Germain is a character from Castlevania Curse of Darkness. And like in that game, he's a magician, philosopher, scholar, etc., although in this series he doesn't sport a stylish top hat. Incidentally, Count Saint Germain was a real historical figure who, somewhat like his video game and now anime counterpart, was a scholar with an interest in alchemy and other esoteric arts, although he lived in the 18th century rather than the 15th century when the series is set. In Curse of Darkness, Saint Germain is a time traveler, which explains the anachronism. In Lindenfeld, we are introduced to the Judge, who is essentially the lord that rules this town. When I first saw the Judge character, I thought he looked a lot like Zed from Curse of Darkness, but aside from his appearance, his motivations are completely different from that character. There is one parallel, however, that I will get to later.
Judge.
In Lindenfeld, we are also introduced to the Priory and its leader, Sala. In case you're not familiar with the term, a priory is a monastery of monks led by a prior, in this case Sala. This particular priory was Christian until the monastery was attacked by one of Dracula's night creatures, at which point they reassessed their relationship to God, began worshipping Dracula, and attempting to bring him back from hell. Carmilla returns to her home base in Styria, which is a historic region of Austria, bringing her vampire soldiers and the Forge Master, Hector. In the last season, Carmilla double-crossed and imprisoned Hector, which is how we find him now. We are introduced to a quartet sisterhood of vampires that rule over the kingdom: Carmilla, Striga, Lenore, and Morana. Aside from Carmilla, none of these are characters from the video games. Striga is the name of a Romanian version of a vampire, and Morana is a Slavic goddess of winter and death. I suspect the name Lenore was taken from Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven, or the much earlier German poem by Gottfried August Burger. At first I thought that Lenore would be a parallel for one of the characters in Castlevania Curse of Darkness, specifically Julia, who is a witch and sister of the Forge Master Isaac, but she isn't a vampire and there really aren't that many parallels. Soon after returning, Carmilla sets her plan in motion with the help of her vampire sisters to expand Styria, conquer its residents, and use them as a supply of living blood.
Drink all the humans forever. Brilliant, isn't it?
The Forge Master Isaac is still loyal to Dracula despite being transported by him last season to what I assume was somewhere in the Middle East. Now Isaac makes his way back to Europe in order to exact revenge on Hector and honor Dracula's wishes to rid the world of humanity. Isaac seems to be riding a unicorn from Curse of Darkness, and in his entourage of monsters, there are a few familiar creatures. For instance, this one seems to be a Snake Man Sentinel from Castlevania 3. When Isaac enters this shop, the shopkeeper is polishing what might be a jade mask from Lament of Innocence. However, he ends up giving Isaac a distance mirror so that Isaac may track down and destroy Hector. At first, I thought this nameless ship captain might be Grant Dynasty or Dynasty. Maybe they changed him to a Jamaican man. He is seemingly a pirate, but really there is no other indication that that's who he is. Alucard meets Sumi and Taka, two vampire hunters from Japan who were formerly slaves of the vampiress Cho, who we saw in the last season, although she was killed during the attack on Dracula's castle by Sypha. Alucard then begins to show them the ways of vampire killing. In a later scene, Alucard even brings Sumi and Taka into the Belmont Hold, which was a literal treasure trove of Easter eggs in the last season. There aren't nearly as many in this season, but I spotted a few. For example, that may be one of the guns from Area of Sorrow, and the jewel to the left is a Mobius brooch from Lament of Innocence. And of course, this is toilet paper. It's Chinese. We also catch another quick glimpse of the portrait of Leon Belmont, the original Belmont, that we saw last season as well.
Accompany me. For tea?
Trevor and Sypha meet with the judge, who explains that after an attack by Dracula's night creatures, the Priory has been gaining more and more crazy monks, crazy followers, and he wants to get to the bottom of it. So he enlists Trevor and Sypha's help, and they begin to investigate. Saint Germain is also investigating the Priory for separate reasons. He's trying to find a key to the Infinite Corridor, which is a reference to Castlevania Curse of Darkness. As in the video game, the Infinite Corridor is a portal, but in this series it's also a gateway to many worlds, one of them potentially Hell. In Curse of Darkness, Saint Germain was a master of teleporting through space and time, which is kind of similar to this Saint Germain, although he hasn't quite mastered it. In fact, in this scene, Saint Germain has a flashback of passing through the Infinite Corridor, and it seems to be a gateway through both time and space. He witnesses futuristic Mecca, very anime, Mesoamerican temples, and even shamans standing in front of Ayers Rock in Australia, before catching a shadowy glimpse of the loved one he lost in the portal, who we never quite see. Any theories on who this is? Because I'm not sure.
I need a drink. Do you need a drink, Saint Germain?
I do not.
Germain, Trevor, and Sypha team up in order to get to the bottom of the Priory and to figure out what they're up to. Germain already recognized the alchemical symbol for sulfur on their armbands, and now the Priory are carving the alchemical symbol for Saturn into various parts of the town. Both of these are real symbols in alchemy and have associations, like Saint Germain says. The symbol for Saturn is associated with a transformation, and the symbol for sulfur is associated with hell. In fact, it's sometimes referred to as the Leviathan Cross, or Satan's Cross, much like the upside-down turned crucifix in the monastery. When Germain finally gets to the bottom of the monastery, he finds what the monks have been hiding. They kept the night creature that attacked the monastery alive and hammered it to a cross in a Christ-like pose, apparently because of the psychic power that the creature has over them, or they're just really insane. The judge and his men, as well as Trevor and Sypha, attempt to stop the Priory, but it's too late. Sala enacts his plan. Incanting dark magic learned from the night creature, the houses in the village marked with the symbol of Saturn are burned in a hellfire and absorbed into the night creature, making it all the more powerful and able to open the gateway to hell, where Dracula and his wife now reside. While all this is going on, Isaac slowly makes his way back to Europe. During one scene, he has an interesting conversation with one of his night creatures.
Do you remember who you were before you went to hell?
Who reveals that he was a philosopher of Athens before being persecuted by Christianity and the empire that ruled Athens at the time. This is very likely a reference to the Neoplatonists, who were philosophers of the school of Athens and persecuted by Emperor Justinian in the early 6th century AD. Later, Isaac encounters a strange woman who kind of reminds me of what are called the Gypsies in Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest. Like Isaac, she is a forge master, and she tells Isaac of a magician in a nearby town who has essentially used his magic to turn everyone into slaves, including the residents of her town. She also mentions that the magician has a large transmission mirror, which can transport many people or an army of night creatures. So Isaac heads to this town, faces down an army of magical zombie slaves, eventually getting to the magician and killing him, which means that Isaac can now use the townsfolk as an army of night creatures, and he has a transmission mirror to transport them to Styria with. As Isaac fights the magician, Trevor and Sypha fight the night creature and all sorts of beings that emerge from the portal from hell, including some familiar Castlevania beasties, like a fire demon from Symphony of the Night, and potentially a warped version of a fox archer from Circle of the Moon, a Malaki from Symphony of the Night. This one resembles a lesser demon from various Castlevania games. These trident-wielding angel things kind of resemble the Cagnazzo from Castlevania Area of Sorrow, and this big boy created by Isaac kind of resembles the Galamoth from Symphony of the Night. While all this is going on, Lenore is using sex as a weapon to essentially enslave Hector, binding him with a magic ring, and Sumi and Taka are doing the same thing in an attempt to take out Alucard. However, they didn't count on Alucard's sword familiar, which he uses to dispatch them.
I never lied to you.
Germain, Sypha, and Trevor are able to defeat the night creatures and close the portal to hell. However, Germain remains behind in the portal so that he can search for his mysterious loved one.
Thank you both! I'll see you again!
During the battle, the judge was killed by Sala, and in one of the creepiest epilogues, we find out that the judge is actually a serial killer of children. Which brings me back to an earlier comment I made about Zed from Curse of Darkness. Spoilers ahead if you haven't played Curse of Darkness, but Zed turns out to be death. So in a way, perhaps, the judge parallels that aspect of Zed's character. To me, the finale of this series is essentially making an argument for Dracula and Isaac's case, which is humanity is horrible. The judge turned out to be a horrible killer of children. Sumi and Taka attempted to kill Alucard despite all of his kindness toward them. And in fact, in the end, Alucard impales Sumi and Taka, essentially becoming his father, Vlad the Impaler. As it stands now, Isaac has a potential army of night creatures, which he will likely direct at Styria in the next season. The Sisterhood of Vampires have Hector, the Forge Master, at their disposal as well, so I believe the next season will definitely be a big, epic battle between Isaac's forces and the Sisterhood's forces for control of Europe. Trevor and Sypha will be caught in between, and hopefully they will try to bring Alucard back from where he has regressed to, essentially becoming his father. But that's how I interpret it. What are your predictions for Season 4 of Castlevania if they end up making one? What did you think of this season? Did I miss an Easter egg or a reference that you noticed? There are a ton of monsters in the Castlevania world and a ton of monsters in the series, so I know I definitely missed a bunch, but I would love to hear which Castlevania monsters you spotted in the series or other references to the games. If you enjoyed this video, please check out my video breaking down the Easter eggs from Castlevania Season 2, which you can view by clicking on the upper right-hand corner. Check out these other videos, subscribe for more breakdowns of series like this. Thanks for watching, and until next time.